Get started. Welcome everyone. It's lovely to have everyone on board so late in the year. I know everyone is rushing around trying to get things done all late last minute, but we are very much looking forward to having actually 3 countries coming together today to talking about e-waste management landscape and building a legacy project based on the Sustainable Recycling Industries project, which will then be continuous with the Circular Electronics Initiative. I'm Katerina. I am the CEO of the African Circular Economy Network, and I'm going to just give you a quick introduction of today's webinar. So we are going to look at the reflections of Africa overarchingly. Then we're going to dive into Ghana, Egypt, and South Africa. And right at the end, we are going to have a panel and also a Q&A session. So if you have questions, please use the Q&A function that you have in front of you. And we're going to share the presentation after the webinar with you as well. I'm very excited to have Aisha, Paul, Rada, Tobias, Samson, and Matthias with me today. And Samson unfortunately couldn't join last minute, but he is going to be also represented by Tobias. So very excited to have all these experts with us today to share the knowledge with us. So just a few things about the African Circular Economy Network. We are the original think and do tank for circular economy transformation across the continent. We have around about 1,000 members covering 42 countries, and we're very much working on making sure we're creating a regenerative economy for the country. So that's really the heart and the vision of ASEAN, to make sure we have this prosperous economy that can actually benefit everyone on the continent. And we are doing that while working towards a restorative African economy through new forms of economic production and consumption, which maintain and regenerate its environmental resources. We have 3 strategic priorities. The one is the connect pillar. That's where our members sit under, our experts, but our stakeholders are very varying, from students to people that work in industry to government officials. Then the second pillar, that's the transform pillar, where we have the programs and the projects. And the third one is the empower pillar, where we do the knowledge sharing, building the skills and the tools to enable people on the ground to actually drive the circular economy. This is a map of ASEAN and the representation that we had. As I mentioned, we have 42 countries. The countries that are colored in a darker green are the countries where we have chapters. So once we have enough members, we are actually putting a chapter together, which then also has a country lead representing those members. But we are collaborating also with organizations internationally, also from a Global South perspective. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Aisha to take us forward through the webinar.
Thank you so much, Katrina, and thank you everyone for joining us today, Wednesday afternoon. I'm Aisha Lotta. I'm the Policy and Legal Strategist and General Analyst for WEEE South Africa, which is now officially the Circular Electronics Initiative. I am so incredibly honored to be your moderator today, standing in for Suzanne, but also just such an honor to be surrounded by my team. It's been a long journey, and there's legacy learnings that we're going to rely on for the next chapter. And I'm really excited to hear from all the chapter leads. Well, not chapter leads, that's ASEAN's language. From the different country projects that we have here today. First, we'll have Matthias Schuep, who will take us through kind of a reflection on where we have been and where we're going. Then we will have Tobias Sauter, who will speak on behalf of Dr. Atimo, who is currently on the ground as and in action at the E-Waste Ghana Fund, in Accra. So he's doing his hard work, and we've got Tobias to fill in. Thank you so much for doing that. And then we have Rada Moehi, who is going to take us through the Egyptian experience and highlight some of their learnings there. And then we will end off with Paul Jones, my colleague here in South Africa. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Matthias. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Aisha. Thank you, Katarina, for inviting me. and especially ASEN for organizing this webinar. I think it's great to have, together with ASEN, a webinar on SRI and also the successor program of CEI, where ASEN actually will play a prominent role in South Africa. I will quickly share my presentation. I hope you can see all my presentation.
Perfect.
Okay, great. I will just share with you a few slides where we talk about where I will talk about how actually the Swiss corporation, or we from Switzerland, actually were involved in these e-waste topics globally. And I start, of course, with the team. These programs and these projects, it's all about faces and persons. This is a picture probably around 5 or 6 years old. It's the team when we started the second phase of the Sustainable Recycling Industries program. And you will see maybe at the end, or we have another picture at the end of the presentation, you see similar faces again. Actually, SECO, that stands for State Secretariat of Economic Affairs. That's one part of Swiss cooperation, international cooperation, which is focusing on economic cooperation, and they supported us and this program since 20 years. And you see, we started in 2003. I mean, that's more than 20 years ago with the so-called Swiss e-waste program. At that time, we started with 2 countries in Asia, China and India, and 1 country in Africa, which is South Africa. It was also my first e-waste project at that time, and that's also when I met Susan, who is also in that call. So that also goes way back, and I think it's one, and I will come back to that, one of the success factors of this program, that we know each other since a long time. We have learned how to work together successfully, and we have, of course, shared from each other. We have shared each other our experience. We have added 2 more countries, Colombia and Peru. Now you ask yourself, why this selection? The SECO, the Swiss, the State Secretariat of Economic Affairs, actually has their focus countries. So it's kind of, Switzerland chose to work closer with certain countries in the world for economic cooperation. And Colombia and Peru were in Latin America. South Africa was one in Africa. Asia was India and China. Now, India and China actually were not continuing that much. I mean, we started then in 2013 the Sustainable Recycling Industries program. China dropped out. This is not really a focus country for cooperation. I mean, China has a completely different development behind it. India nowadays is also not anymore, but we still had a component in India also at the beginning of the SRI project. But you see, we then started with Egypt and Ghana, and South Africa actually came back later again to the whole set of countries. I also want to mention that we had in this whole SRI program, we were not just working in these countries, we had all through that, we had a global presence and a global component, as we call it. We were part of the foundation of STEP, and RELAC is kind of the network in Latin America. We also helped building up a global community of practice, and we also engaged in synergy projects like with UN organization, also with GIZ. We also developed, we were working on standardization activities, the ISO I1, maybe some of you know the ISO 59014, that's about sustainable management of secondary raw materials, and has a focus on circular economy practice and also on informal sector. And there was also a component one, metrics and methods. I'm not going into detail for this. I think it's also always interesting to see how the impact, how we define our projects and our projects, how this evolved over time. So actually it was from more focusing on living conditions of the poor, as we say, or to reduce hazards, to more having a business focus in our program. So improvement of living conditions for the affected local was standing at the beginning. Then realizing reduce hazards is a key thing. So the environmental focus came also here into the picture without reducing the attractiveness of business, and then strengthen the economic performance and improve the working conditions. So we see business played a role, but it was much stronger in the sustainable recycling industries project. First, we talked about the sustainable integration and participation of small and medium enterprises from developing and transition countries in the global recycling of secondary non-renewable resources. So meaning the trade and the global nature of this type of waste stream actually became an issue or was a topic in our program. And in the end, we just said, okay, we have to concentrate on favorable framework conditions that enable the development of a sustainable recycling industry for e-waste and related waste streams. So very general, but saying, okay, framework conditions are important so businesses can thrive. And you will see a little bit then later what that means in the countries. Now, also, I think that's interesting to see is we have like this maturity matrix. We have developed this towards the end of our program. This also can be retrieved from the brochure we have published just recently, and it's also linked within the announcement of this webinar. So in the different countries, there are different countries, and you see also there are different developments in the countries. Whereas most of the countries kind of started at the level of ad hoc, but maybe not South Africa in our programs in South Africa, especially in Africa, in the African context, was more advanced, has a stronger recycling industry already. But you see, like the countries like Colombia and Peru, they are at level 4, where we interpreted fully functioning e-waste management systems. So they have legislation, they have take-back schemes, they have recyclers, they have standards, etc. So for us, that's it's not fully functioning. There's still a lot of issues and challenges, but they are more driving into level 5. So they need to improve and continuous improvement and outlook for the future. Whereas the other countries, they're still in our program, will participate in the CI project. We feel like they're more in level 2 or 3, establishing baseline or gearing up for improvement. Coming to the end, the SHREE project, it's always about measuring success. And we, in this large international cooperation program, you have these indicators where you have to say, okay, what did actually the program contribute? You saw it's an engagement over 20 years in all the countries. And it's one of the learnings. We do believe we contributed a lot. You will hear that from the countries, but it's to measure this in this still kind of early stage of developing an industry. It's not so easy. You see, some numbers here and how it developed, but it's very hard to compare between the countries. And it's also sometimes you have very key success factors like formation of recyclers associations in Ghana, or the PROs, how that developed in South Africa. I will not go into detail. This is really what we will hear from the countries. Yeah, with this, thank you, especially the SHREE team. You see there, this is the team ready for the successor program, the Circular Electronics Initiatives, and I'm looking forward to working together with everybody again. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Matthias. Yeah, it's such a beautiful photo of everyone. It's great that I snuck in there right at the end, slid into the front there. So I want to call up Tobias. Are you with us?
Yes, sure, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you and I can see you. Can you share your screen, please?
Yes. Share my screen. So you can see the screen?
Oh, I can't see you or the screen.
Give me a second. Maybe it comes now. Is the screen visible now?
No, sorry. Oh, I can see you.
Give me a second. Yes. And the screen, is it transmitted?
Not yet.
Oh, I try again. Give me a second.
Yes, perfect. Okay, we can see
you. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you, Aisha. Thank you, Matthias, for setting the scene. And let's go into the countries now. As mentioned before, I will present today on behalf of the whole Ghana SRI team, which from the Ghanaian side in Ghana was led by Samson Atiemo. and from the international side was coordinated by us, Öko Institute. And we were asked actually to present impacts and outlooks and outlook of the SRI phase from the Ghanaian perspective. In doing so, I will just, for the next 10 minutes, look into 4 points, some highlights and milestones, how the SRI project developed over the last 10 years already. So the SRI project, as you've seen, is 10 years old. However, some initiatives have been even older. Then some retrospectives into the last 6 years, which was the second phase of SRI in Ghana. Some outlook to the upcoming Circular Electronics Initiative, and of course some acknowledgements in the end. So what are milestones? Here we started with SRI around 10 years ago with the baseline assessment, a study that you can find on the SRI website. During the same year, the first official legislation was passed in Ghana related to e-waste, which is which was Act 917. You see why I say, you will see later why I say was. Also, we started during the first phase with ULAB facility benchmarks. ULAB means used lead acid batteries, and as lead is one of the most toxic metals that are still used widely, and recycling is quite deadly in many countries for workers, we turn to this. We, during the first phase, we developed the technical guidelines on e-waste management, especially environmentally sound e-waste management, focused on different tiers in the chain, collectors, collection centers, and so on, which then, you will see later, turned to a mandatory official technical guidelines in Ghana. However, that was during the second phase then. Then we started with systemic assessment of the lead recycling plants, used lead acid battery recycling plants in the days. Some and also sometime end of first phase, beginning of the second phase, we started to consolidate training content to make a trainee program out of it, which is now molded into a TVET curriculum. That was actually in 2024, a bit later. And then we all remember the COVID pandemic. However, for us, this was also a chance. We developed several reports we turned into waste tires. We developed many, especially Andreas Mannert and his colleagues, but I was also part of it. We developed, validated, and piloted standard operating procedures. That means rules for used lead acid battery recycling. Typically, this is something an industry would develop themselves. However, the sector was not ready to develop such standard operating procedures. So we did it for the sector. It was adopted as technical guidelines by the ministry, by the authority, Environmental Protection Authority, EPA. Later, I will go a little bit into detail. Then you all have known Akpo Bloshi or still know it a bit, which was one of the biggest scrap yards in the world, and definitely the biggest in Accra, which was just demolished back in 2021, which was a huge shock for all the e-waste programs as well as SRI. It was not that hard for SRI because we turned to some other industries. You see waste tires and mainly batteries that are of the highest concern for us. So, however, that was a shock and we had to deal with this. And then you see some other milestones. We did an assessment of co-processing of used tires with external experts. New associations were founded, like the Eastern Region Scrap Dealers Association, Used Tires Upcycling Association up there. And then we wrapped up last year with the PV panel study. It's an upcoming new waste stream, not so new waste stream, but yeah, electrification is going on the African continent, and we see PV panels coming back. We have seen the mega trend of pyrolysis of a certain, mainly of waste tires, which we see quite critical. You find a report on the SRI website that, and then to wrap up this whole, yeah, let's say 10 years earlier this year, Environmental Protection Act was passed. So it's a new more integrated act where most of the electronic waste paragraphs went into, and that regulates actually how e-waste collection shall be organized. It sets the basis for the so-called e-waste fund, which is the cornerstone, which is the heart of the EPR system in Ghana. I don't want to go too much into detail. We have several outcomes in the SRI program, and I think we will have the same structure in the CEI programs. And the first one is on policy. I don't want to read out each of the parts. However, we did, and this is something that I want to stress here because I've only 10 minutes, the SRI team was routinely consulted for the development of various central aspects of the framework policy. We did policy brief documents based on the technical findings. We can say, which is the second bullet point here, we gave policy support on a subsector reform when it comes to waste tires and used lead acid batteries, and also supported the National E-Waste Fund. Yeah, this is the fourth bullet point here. In being setting up collection points, etc. That's also a reason why Samson Atiomo cannot be here today. Then the second outcome was always is normative outcomes. It's about regulation, about rules, about conformity assessment, making sure rules are applied, and not that rules, that regulation is actually effective, and rules are not broken. That's what I wanted to say here. So you see, we developed, especially in the battery sector, with a focus on lead standard operating procedures that I mentioned already. That these very big documents, it's 36 standard operating procedure. It's kind of a Bible of lead recycling that was developed during COVID. So again, COVID was not only a shock, it was also a chance for us. You find them on their publicly available on the SRI website, and they became binding law for regulating the industry in Ghana. Also, trainings, compliance, and performance audits would have taken place during the SRI 2 phase. So, yeah, we could say around 100 auditors were trained during that phase. Here, you can see that here. And then the third outcome is always related in these projects are related to businesses. How can we support businesses? The SRI team, we developed a TVET curriculum for recycling technologies. I already mentioned the new Scrap Dealers Association, because formalization of the activities are actually key. Then also supported industries in upcycling. There was this Used Tires Upcycling Association. Also in treatment, a new waste tire treatment line was opened by Recop in Accra. We supported them technically. And downstream options, I already mentioned co-processing here. Also, we turned into e-waste plastics and supported electro-recycling here together with EMPA. And that is something that is a consequence of demolishing the biggest scrapyard in Accra in 2021. We mandated an expert, Professor Kumi Boateng, to map the scrap yards that were newly opened in the whole region of Greater Accra. And what you can see is the lowest green point here is Akbubloshi in the middle of Accra, which was demolished. And as a consequence, we can say 14 major informal sites grew up, popped up like mushrooms. So the solution that this regional government had to just demolish one site led to an effect that 14 informal sites popped up. So that's one of the consequences that we are faced with, and the whole region is faced with. And this is also why we need to go on. The last output is on hazardous fractions. I already mentioned significant used lead acid battery sector improvement. Then also the waste tires, where we had a close look into reuse, upcycling, recycling, etc. The co-processing, you see the cement one of the single cement kilns in the middle of Ghana, actually in Bupe. It's near Tamale. That we investigated if co-processing was possible, and it is with a certain investment, and especially into continuous emission monitoring, which would be needed. And then I already mentioned pyrolysis and PV panel recycling studies, something that we can build up on in the next phase, or it's not the next phase in the new initiative, Circular Electronic Industry. Sustainability of action, 2 messages. In the first phase, we published the technical guidelines for general e-waste management, and at the beginning of the second phase, it became so-called tertiary law, mandatory technical guidelines for Ghana, issued by the Environmental Protection Authority. And secondly, all the work on the used lead-acid batteries was also taken up in other initiatives with a focus on Nigeria and Tanzania. So there is some sort of sustainability and also of outreach of the programs. So we can say this free project was for Ghana a key stepping stone to reform and upgrade the Ghana e-waste and hazardous waste management landscape. Now, outlook for what is coming now, we all know that substandard management of e-waste is still happening in Ghana a lot, and it's still the reality very often. So this we have to continue. Also, policy developments and especially training efforts have not reached all corners. So there's also something to be done here when it comes to training. However, it's not only training. The key challenge for us as an SRI team is the development and rollout of the financing mechanism, making sound recycling financially viable. And that doesn't happen in a free market. This only happens in a regulated market with a functioning financial mechanism. Under the e-waste fund in Ghana, EPR schemes are different in the different countries. We will see that later. Then we have also critical downstream solutions that are not fully regulated, PV panels, lithium-ion batteries, and so on. Something for the new. And also, we realize that as repair, reuse, repurposing is so dominant, we will get, and Ghana will see a lot of reused and repaired and repurposed waste components or like old devices. And product design is key. Is the question for like stopping the end of pipe idea, going back to the beginning at product design. There the question is how can Ghana as a country support this? You can think of import regulation, something like that. Recommendations for CEI, definitely an effective financing mechanism that I've already mentioned is key. Otherwise, we will get stuck somehow. Government should lead by example. This is something we always wanted, but maybe it's something that could be done better during CEI. Depends. The 5-step waste hierarchy for sure, not only focusing on recycling, but also on refurbishment, on remanufacturing, repurposing. We all know this, but it's really key, and we really try to get higher. I think CEI has also a special focus on this. Of course, informal sector associations need to be addressed again. Then we want to say, and we want to stress that we would like to support the registered scrap dealers, not only or not the informal sector, but just the registered ones. Substreams that are really polluting should be in the focus in the next phase as well from our perspective, because we have limited resources, we have limited attention. Why not turning to those waste streams that are most harmful, that are most critical? We did it in the past with lead, but there are other like mercury and other substances that are really critical for human health and the environment. Let's turn to them. They typically have a negative value because they are not a profit. They don't have a profit margin. The recycling net costs money. So again, here that's the reason why we need the effective financing mechanism. yeah, and then the phase out of hazardous substances in products for sure. And again, the stress here, effective regulation needs to be turned to. We have again the normative output in the CEI to create that level playing field. Otherwise, of course, the economic actor that pollutes most wins at the end of the day. So you can read through these recommendations in the Growing Big policy brief on the SRI website. It's just left for me to thank to the donors and yeah, the external partners in Ghana, which is the Ministry and the Environmental Protection Authority and all the other partners. It was a bit longer than 10 minutes, sorry for that, but thanks.
Very insightful, so don't worry, you had the crowd. Thank you so much. I mean, we know Ghana is emblematic of this e-waste toxic trade. And I think that that's the image that we have of Agbogloshi, is kind of see it in our collective memories. So the fact that our interventions caused this kind of spread out of unintended consequences, that's yet another lesson that we can take, because at the end of the day, we know that it's not just Ghana struggling with this, and it's not a country-specific problem by a long shot. It's systemic, it's global, and with the Circular Electronics Initiative, we're really trying to look at the production and consumption side so that we're not just reacting to this constant flow. So very exciting stuff. I always get very excited on this topic, obviously, but let me not go down a rabbit hole. Let me invite Khada over to give her presentation on Egypt's experience.
Thank you, Aisha. I'll share my presentation. Oh. Is it showing?
Not yet. Thank you so much for joining us. I know it's quite late or early where you are.
Early. It's not allowing me to share. I don't know why. Can you, I sent you the.
Yeah. Krista, could you share from your side? Or give Khada the capabilities?
She should be able to share, but in the meantime, let me share from my side, Khada.
Okay. It tells me I need a password to share, so I don't know.
Oh no. It's fine. Krista will get it up and running. In the meantime, I just want to stress to everybody that you all have incredible credentials. I'm reading all of these bios in awe. Please do put some of those insights and Q&As in the Q&A section so that we can tackle some of your questions as well. I think that would be really insightful. Thanks. Okay, Khada, there we go.
Okay, thank you all for having me and listening to me. And as Matthias mentioned, Egypt has been working on SHREE for the past 10 years. So I'm going to share with you here some of our achievements or where we reached at the end of these 10 years. Next. Okay, the program overview, as you already know now, was built on 4 pillars, and it really catalyzed the systematic transformation in Egypt's e-waste sector, moving it from really an informal, fragmented system towards a more structured industry. With a foundation for sustainability on the long term. It needs a lot of developing, and there are still areas that or challenges that have been faced that we'll tackle with the C, but it really is it made the foundation for a full industry that wasn't there. And again, it's on it's 5 pillars, it's 4 pillars: the policy and normative, business and hazardous. Next. Okay, the key achievements on the policy front was of course, that we managed to have the e-waste management law And as in any developing country, the law is essential to enforce and to enforce proper management of e-waste. And this was achieved in 2022, and this defined the e-waste as hazardous with special conditions, which made a huge difference in the industry, in the storage, in collection, in a lot of areas. We laid the roadmap for the EPR implementation, and that was consultant with all the stakeholders and the policymakers, and approved. Yet, of course, it has not been enforced yet, and that's what we'll intend to work on with the CII. There's another achievement that really made a difference in the process and work on operation of SHRI was the institutional coordination. We brought together a number of ministries to work together, mainly the Ministry of Environment and the WEMRA, which is the Waste Management Regulatory Authority in the Ministry of Environment, and the MCIT, Ministry of Communication, Information Technology. Bringing them on the same table, making them work together was a great achievement. And we completely changed. For the past 10 years, the e-waste status in Egypt was actually negligible. It wasn't mentioned. It wasn't. I mean, and nobody knew what the e-waste status in Egypt. Now it is published and circulating on all on SHRI website in Egypt. And I mean, if you search for it, you will find a completely different e-waste status. Next. On the normative, a normative, as Tobias mentioned, it's the way things are carried and how it's audited, and I mean it regulates and the whole operation system. And on that, we have a technical standard for WEEE now. This is developed with the Ministry of Environment, and we had a lot of training done for the auditors, and we have an audit handbook which makes it very easy to. It's more like a standard operating procedures for them to follow. We have not only trained auditors, but we did it train of trainers, so that in case the turnover, because the turnover is high in the government, so we involved not only the government, but also academic institutions, private sector, so that we have a pool of trainers that will maintain sustainability of information. We did, of course, a lot of pilot audits, and but yet we still have to develop on that, and that's where the CEI will continue. And we have a conformity assessment system now that's documented, that's approved by the government, that's going to be their Bible, as we say, in the auditing sector. Next. On the business environment, one of the best achievement, I mean, not one, a few, but actually when SHRI started, there was only one recycler there was no industry. Now we have over 27 recyclers, and maybe more now as we speak. That, of course, affected the employment growth in Egypt, and you can imagine how many workers were actually employed by these factories. And one of the greatest achievements is that we managed to establish a recycling non-governmental organization, the EGWM, and it brings together all the recyclers and liaises between the informal sector and the formal sector, because as an informal sector, you cannot, as a formal sector, they cannot receive e-waste from the informal officially because they cannot have any bills, and they will not issue any bills because they're informal, and that they were manipulating the market. So this NGO has come to liaise between these two sectors. Not only that, but they were a voice to the voice to the government. They were able to bring together all the tender inspectors. We're supporting them with a lot of capacity building and field visits. So this organization is, I think, it's a pillar in the transformation and the sustainability of the recyclers in this industry. We also developed a digital platform that will serve for as a collection, as a platform to bring together all the stakeholders, whether they are that's especially the household area, because we've addressed the governmental e-waste, we've addressed the banking system, most of and that's only 20% of the e-waste. But our main concern, and that's where the informal sector manipulates, is the households. So this platform will serve as a linkage to the recyclers with the household, and it's been developed, and will ensure that it continues and it's sustainable through the CEI. We also developed a curriculum on the e-waste management and refurbishment, as the focus was on not only recycling, but reuse of whatever it's possible. And that curriculum was installed and running in the WEEE schools. And that's also has been running now for a year, I can say. We will continue to support that and develop on it. It started with the reuse and refurbishment, their focus, because their labs and their technicalities were already developed in the reuse. We will continue to support the e-waste management so that they can further continue with this curriculum. So next. Okay, in the hazardous e-waste pillar, we addressed the lithium-ion batteries and in a feasibility study that would serve as it's a ready-made feasibility study to be able to, for investors, and to show the private sector that it is profitable, and how could it be profitable for them to tackle hazardous fractions. However, that of course depends on the implementation. For it to be profitable, on the implementation of the EPR that we intend to follow up later on. We have in this we have a roadmap for sound management. We've done a lot of baseline and opportunity studies in this area, but we intend to continue with the feasibility study by enforcing the EPR. And the intention with the CEI is to further address other waste streams, because we've only addressed e-waste and ICT products in the SHRI, but we intend the direction is to extend on the e-waste streams. Next. Okay, the lessons learned here in the SHRI is that the legal framework is number one. Without a law, without enforcement, it would be very difficult to handle anything. And to have the whole management system properly operating, it needs a legal framework enforced and established and enforced, of course. Standards is very important because it enables trust. It's to have technical standards and guidelines and standard operating procedures. That was very important, and that was the roadmap for the recyclers to operate, and it's very essential for implementing the EPR in the near future. Also, industry organization matters. creating a collective voice through the NGO that was established and created. That made also a great difference. It voiced the recyclers in front of the government. They were able to collectively work together to some extent, in spite of the competition that's in between them, between the recyclers themselves, but it brought them together and gave them strength. Also, the informal integration was critical, and that only actually happened through this NGO. We tried at the very beginning of the Shri one to bring them into, give them capacity building, try to talk to them, but until there was a way for them to operate and reach the former recyclers through that NGO, it was not really very effective. So the CEI should also follow up and continue in this direction. Of course, sustainable financing is key, and that's where the EPR comes in, and especially for hazardous fractions. And it's ready. It's at the hands of the ministry. We need to follow up on enforcing it or on making it operational. And of course, again, skills and capacity building, field visits, the curriculum at the WEEE schools, that's very important, and it's institutionalizing the training and the education. We learned that it was very important and brought a lot of awareness and a lot of interest, and it's at the end, it's an investment in human capital. That's the only way to maintain sustainability. I think we're done. Next, just to check, but I think we're done. Okay, the legacy outcomes for Egypt, the legal framework, and that's the EPR and the law and the EPR that's at the verge of being operational, an industry. And honestly, when she started, as I told you, there was one recycler. Now there is an industry, a whole industry with the conformity system, with the standard system, with guidelines, with auditing handbook, a curriculum that is running in the WEEE schools. Sorry, maybe I didn't explain what WEEE schools is. WEEE is the formal telecommunication company in Egypt, and it addresses and the WEEE schools, they're technological schools that train. Gives training secondary and eventually high I mean, a diploma in handling ICT equipment and so on. That's where the curriculum is installed. So I don't know if I passed my 10 minutes. So, but I think I'm on the last stage. So institutional capacity has been institutional capacity has been enforced, and the market and business assets, which is the digital platform, the e-Khorda, the ecosystem, and the NGO, and there's a roadmap and pathway for hazardous fraction treatment. That's the legacy outcomes for Egypt. Okay. Next. Okay, building on Shri's foundation for the CAI, we definitely need to operationalize the EPR at scale and ensure it's working. That will secure financing mechanism for the e-waste, and will further develop the industry. We have to complete the conformity assessment and auditor certification system, because we did train the auditors. We have a handbook and guidelines, but we need to institutionalize a centralized auditing system. We have to scale the informal integration, develop incentives for the informal collectors' participation through the digital platform that has been established, and invest in hazardous infrastructure and widen the scope for the e-waste streams, as I've mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
That was the last. You're welcome.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that. I mean, the fact that you got everyone around the same table and talking and actually doing some work, that's incredible. I mean, to balance those interests from government, from industry, and then the informal sector, it's definitely a feat. So yeah, thank you so much. And next we have Paul Jones, who is my colleague in South Africa. Over to you, Paul. Thank you so much. Perfect. And I see a huge round of applause. Khada, I hope you saw that as well.
Yeah, thank you.
And a welcome applause to Paul.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thanks, Aisha. Thanks, everyone. Yeah, so I think I'm going to continue the discussions today by just presenting some of the work that we've done in South Africa. The South African team comprises of myself, Aisha, and Suzanne, who's also on this call. But I am just going to present the work that we've done as a team over the last 3 years. So I think, as you would have seen in Matthias's initial slide, we were a little bit late to the party as the South African team. Not usual for South Africans to be late to a party. No, we started in the SHREE process kind of late 2020, around that time. So we really have had about 5 years of implementation. And at the point that we started, there were kind of a number of challenges that existed in the WEEE landscape. One was an absence of an overarching policy. So, EPR policy had kicked in at that point, or was starting to kick in at that point in South Africa. The notices had been issued, but there wasn't an overarching e-waste policy. To kind of with an overarching goal, vision, objectives to guide industry development. There were no technical standards or guidelines for proper procedures. So we do have a number of very large and well-established recycling entities that exist in the country, and they adhere to their own standards, many of which are high and are aligned with global standards. However, there was no kind of industry-wide standards for WEEE processing in the country, which creates challenges in consistency, control, etc. There was also significant barriers that small enterprises face in the WEEE management sector. So it's quite a complex legal landscape to understand what registrations, certificates you require. Limited access to affordable financing. So as Gada mentioned, same issue that's faced in Egypt around kind of sustainable funding and technical support, and limited information and awareness about WEEE management. There was also an absence of technical capacity, appropriate technologies, and incentives for problematic WEEE fractions. So those are the fractions that are less understood, such as the plastics, which are very difficult to process, and some of the new types of e-waste, like solar panels, lithium-ion batteries, for example. So that was the position when we started the SHREE project. Not to say that we've addressed all of that, but we've had a really good go at it, and we've had a number of achievements. And I'm just going to jump through some of the achievements that we, through the SHREE project, starting with outcome 1, which is, as per the other projects, we followed a very similar framework, and that's institutional elements. And so the first thing was that we developed a national WEEE policy in support of the DFFE, which is our National Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment. And that national WEEE policy has just been gazetted about 2 months ago. So that's a really big milestone for us as a project, but also for the country as a whole, where we now have this overarching framework in place. We developed a comprehensive policy costing framework that speaks to that policy, and that's going to assist the department with implementation because it outlines specific activities and tries to put budgets to each of these as well. So it helps the national government identify who is key in implementing and what kind of funding is required to do this implementation. We've also created a municipal WEEE Compass, which we call it a municipal WEEE Compass, through engagement with municipalities across the country. And we're busy finalizing that Compass report as we speak. It's been a little bit delayed, but I think we've got really good inputs and buy-in, and we've engaged much more than we thought we were going to be in the beginning. And we've managed to kind of come up with a document that allows government departments across all spheres, essentially, but mostly at the municipal sphere, to really understand, what other challenges are being faced by other municipal bodies in WEEE management, how to navigate the legal requirements, how to work with PROs, etc., and how to release assets from their stockpiles. So those were the main achievements under Outcome 1. Under Outcome 2, we developed norms and standards for WEEE management. These have been, it's been decided that these will be voluntary for a short while, a period of about 3 years, and then hopefully become a legally binding norms and standards with some updates, which needs to be led by industry. So industry needs to kind of take ownership of these, test them over the next couple of years, and then edit and propose these as norms and standards for the industry in the years to come. And then finally, related to the norms and standards was a package of other work that we did, kind of the building blocks of a conformity assessment scheme. So it's essentially, what are the checks and balances to ensure that these norms and standards are being implemented? How do we monitor this? Who audits this? How is it audited? And a bunch of pilot audits were also conducted as part of our WEEE program in line with that. In terms of Outcome 3, which is the business-related outcome, we developed We Are South Africa, which is a national awareness platform. Maybe one of my colleagues can drop the link in the chat. That has now been moved to the under hosting of Circular South Africa. And we hope to kind of drive that forward. And we're also in the process of finalizing a WEEE Masterclass, which will be an interactive online masterclass that'll be hosted on the website as well. That should be uploaded in the next, 2 weeks, next week to 2 weeks, hopefully. So we will be sharing that far and wide when that comes. And that's an introduction to e-waste type of masterclass. So it goes through a bunch of different modules, but it should be very useful for those trying to get a sense of what e-waste management is about, understanding the various aspects of it. We've also mapped incentives and related support programs that are available in South Africa. So if you're a small business or a larger business, or you want to move into the space, this will help you understand what kind of incentives or incubators you can access. And then a small scale WEEE facility framework report. So that is providing, there's 2 elements. One is a best practice or good practice report, which gives examples of across the entire world, what's been happening in small e-waste facility development, and then a more guided document, which provides a framework to say, these are the kind of costs you need to consider. These are the kind of processes you need to consider as a small business. And the first part of that, actually, all of these reports are housed on the WEEE website, which I think Matthias shared a link earlier and we'll share again. And the second version of that's being designed and will be uploaded soon. And then we did a number of specialist websites focusing on problematic WEEE fractions. So there was lithium-ion batteries, solar panels, and WEEE plastics. And, through those webinars, engaged around emerging technologies for these challenges, and also compiled and published 3 reports which speak to the outcomes of that and really help try and say, these are some of the areas of further research and focus we need around these problematic waste streams. Again, those 3 reports are up on the WEEE website. So that is kind of what we worked on and achieved over the last couple of years. What we consider to be remaining challenges and opportunities in South Africa is that, something that's kind of come up through our work quite a lot is the need for regional approaches for WEEE management. And we see this particularly in areas in South Africa where there are less capacitated or more rural municipalities that don't have the ability to install infrastructure or have collection, and looking at how do we potentially create satellite collection points and consolidate e-waste more regionally, where there's less ability for each municipality to perform their own functions. So how do we look at regional approaches? There's a need for strengthening municipal capacity and fundraising for infrastructure development. So that's a big one that's come up through our work. The need to continually pursue collaborative frameworks and partnerships. So we have, as the SHREE project, and we've also seen it in other areas, more and more kind of partnerships and collaborations happening within WEEE management in the country. But there is still a lot of challenges and blockages with municipalities, for example, collaborating with PROs. It's very difficult, and there are legislative and procurement challenges that they face in working together. So we really need to see what are these frameworks that help us pursue collaboration going forward. We need to also unlock and look at more sustainable business models and look at other market mechanisms to grow the e-waste sector. We need to continue with the transfer of skills and capacity building, but particularly within the informal space. So there is, I think, a lot of work that needs to be done around informality within e-waste management and upskilling and training. And you'll see that's something we're thinking about for the next years to come. And then always considering how we balance, environmental protection with economic opportunity. And I think that's cross-cutting in the waste space as a whole. So what are we thinking? What are we kind of putting forward as we move into the next 4 years? And I think it's been spoken to today that the SRI project has come to an end in 2025. But as we move from 2026 onwards, the Circular Electronics Initiative is now going to be taking over, and it's structured in a very similar way, except with some minor edits to the outcomes. But outcome one is still policy and legislative. And what we are going to be focusing on there predominantly is assisting with implementation of our national WEEE policy. So as I mentioned, it's been gazetted, but it needs to be implemented. So we're going to be working side by side with the DFFE and helping implementation of that policy. We want to, quite importantly, ensure alignment between new policies and strategies that are coming up and the work we've done. So we have the National Waste Management Strategy that's up for review at the moment, or being reviewed at the moment. We have the National Circular Economy Action Plan, which is being developed. How do we ensure that the WEEE policy is aligned and speaking to those, and those policies are speaking to what we've said? We also really want to drive amendments to the EEE notice. So this is our EPR notice. And Suzanne mentioned this earlier in the chat too, around ensuring clear decontamination targets. So how, we understand that the EPR notices have been issued and that they've been kind of tested for a few years, but what we've seen as a major gap is that it's not really incentivizing decontamination of hazardous e-waste. It's allowing, effectively, as Suzanne said, cherry picking to still continue. The high value fractions are being extracted and the rest no one's really dealing with. How do we get EPR to actually assist us drive decontamination of those problematic and hard to deal with components, for example, and ring fencing funding and reporting requirements related to that. And we want to continue to update and strengthen our WEEE Compass. So what we're developing now is a first edition, but we want to really dig deeper into some of the specific issues where municipalities are really struggling and have a more nuanced edition 2 and edition 3 as we move forward. We want to support adoption and moving the norms and standards that we've done into mandatory standards, and along with that, developing standards for reuse and refurbishment. The first with SHREE, it was around recycling. With CEI, it's about the circularity of electronics. So how do we speak to reuse and refurbishment and encourage that in our standards? And then continuing with conformity assessments, auditing, setting up an auditing body and doing pilot audits and audit testing. Around outcome 3, there's a big focus on informality, and we're going to support informal waste pickers or reclaimers through training and pilot projects. We want to test and showcase solutions for those hazardous fractions that we talked about. Establish an e-waste industry association. So we have EPR, we have the PROs that are in place, but the e-waste industry has come forward and said we would love to have an industry body that's the voice for the recyclers in the country. One voice that can kind of echo what we as an industry would like to say, work with PROs, and then continue to enhance awareness via our We Are South Africa website in partnership with CSA, Circular South Africa. And then finally, a new outcome of the CEI project that wasn't part of SRI is around monitoring, and that speaks predominantly to data. And so we want to try and understand the data management system that exists in South Africa, mapping the whole value chain and understanding where data is generated, captured, who are the role players, and then really try and help us facilitate updating and improving of that WEEE management system, WEEE data management system, and then also developing baseline data as well. And then standard operating procedures to guide the collection, verification, quality assurance, as well as how's that data presented and shared more broadly. So that's a snapshot of what we are planning for in the next 4 years as a team. It seems daunting now when reading it out, but yeah, that is us. And thank you so much. We look forward to some further engagement. And if there's anything you would like to engage with the South African team about, please contact us. And yeah, we're more than happy to chat. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Paul. Yes, I know we've definitely decided to just tackle it all, which I mean is very much like us, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Of course, things will highlight and be highlighted for us while we engage with stakeholders. But yeah, better to start broad and then drill back down. I would like to invite all of the speakers to turn on your videos, be present with us. We've got about 20 minutes left of this webinar, and I want to kind of dive into some of the questions. We don't have a lot of questions, and I would like to prompt our participants to start populating the Q&A, start populating the chat, preferably the Q&A, just so that I can like keep track of things. But I see a hand is up, which is great. I'll call on you now. So yes, general, that hand has disappeared. But perhaps Levine, there we go. I just keep your hand up so I know where you are, and then we have a sense of so who else would like to put their hand up and speak directly to the panel. So first, just a few questions, and then we'll go into a proper panel discussion with some questions that I have for you, but also just to speak more broadly on the next steps for the Circular Electronics Initiative and perhaps more of a African work group. I know from our side, the only reason being late to the party was anything but beneficial. Well, it was because we could stand on the shoulders of the previous projects. So Ghana and Egypt really helped us catch up. And I really do think that is the strength of the SHREE project, is this ability to have the work group, but also have cross learnings. So yeah, thank you. Okay, I'd like to invite Levine to unmute, show us your face if you are brave, and ask the panel a question. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, thank you for the insights. Quite interesting what every other country is doing out there, especially in the global south. My question is to the South Africa SRI program outcomes. I know we're always talking about supporting informal e-waste pickers, since we know they're the largest numbers of players in the e-waste business. But then if I look at it in the Kenyan concept, there's a big gap in terms of infrastructure and support. And we're always talking about health and safety measures, licenses. So it's quite difficult to talk about formalizing the sector rather than integrating them with the formal recyclers to work with them. So mine is really a question in terms of South Africa's informal sector. Is there some sort of integration, like a working group? Like, are you aware of all the informal sectors? Are they in some form of association or registered group? And how do you work with them? Because it's quite a big number. And I'm always thinking ahead in terms of the research I'm doing. How do we work with them and support them to ensure that they're still in their business, but now they work in better environmental conditions and still get socioeconomic benefit? Yeah, something like that.
Absolutely. I see you're in Cape Town. That's really exciting. We can meet up and have a coffee at some point. But Paul,
Yeah.
go ahead. I'm sure you have lots to say on this point.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, thanks, Levine. Yeah, so in our first in the WEEE project in the last couple of years, we haven't really worked in that space too much. You know, as we kind of got to the end of our WEEE program, there was some engagement with the informal sector because most of our work is more at a kind of policy and research level. But we are now moving into that as part of the next phase. And just to respond to your question specifically, we do have the South African Waste Pickers Association, SALPA, and the African Reclaimers Organization, ARROW. And we are going to be working with both of those organizations. We've already engaged with ARROW and brought them on board in understanding and reviewing our WEEE Masterclass, for example. And we've started to talk to them about identifying potential pilot projects within the e-waste space. So yeah, we're going to be working closely with those organizations. The informality in South Africa is, yeah, it's a challenge in that, well, we have waste picker integration guidelines that exist at a national level, at least, which help guide our work. And those speak to integrating informal workers into the waste value chain rather than trying to formalize. So it's not about formalization, it's about how do we ensure that waste pickers or reclaimers are brought into the value chain of various e-waste processes. And our national norms and standards that have been developed also speak to how, you know, at what level informal waste collectors and waste pickers are kind of integrated into that system, and how do formal recyclers work closely with them. If you're interested, I'll share a link in the chat of our good practice report, which was a nice summary of a range of different interventions across the globe, but also some South African examples of how the informal sector can be integrated into e-waste value chains. So I'll pop that in the chat now. And I think definitely go meet Aisha for a chat in Cape Town.
Yeah, thanks so much, Paul. Exactly. I think the next step is really to get as much resources and empowerment and recognition out there for the people who are doing the hard work. They're entrepreneurs, they're savvy, they know what they're doing. We just need to provide as much support and infrastructure as possible. And, you know, Ghana, Kenya, Egypt, all of the other countries that have been mentioned, Cote d'Ivoire, we're all going to be faced with basically nano recyclers, and we need to be able to create some support there. I'd like to call on Matthias. There was a question around social life cycle assessments, and perhaps you can just highlight the work that's been done, and then we will take the next hand up, Reginald. So just hold your horses. Let's get an answer on that, and then I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, Aisha. I actually answered just with a few words in the chat. It was an answer if there is any competence around. We actually do quite some work on social life cycle assessment. We have an international renowned expert in our team, that's Sonia Valdivia. So whenever there is any issue in this direction, I'm myself, I'm not an expert, but if there is anything, reach out to us. I think we can probably get into a discussion on that. Thanks.
Yeah, I think it's an incredibly powerful tool, and the fact that it's focusing more on the social aspects, it's really coming more closer to the heart of what is necessary in the African context. So we've got Reginald's hand up. Can I ask you to unmute and show us your lovely face? We're not seeing or hearing you just yet.
Hello?
There we go. Hi, Reginald.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for organizing this webinar. Reginald here, based in Japan, and assistant professor and also an Ascend member. So I just have a quick questions for all the presenters today. First, I'm very much interested in e-waste recycling. Well, it's kind of new for me, but because I have some students working on this. In the case of Kenya and DRC. So I'm just curious if the SRI maybe is interested in some research collaboration, then we could, and if there is kind of any ongoing project in Kenya and DRC, I'll be interested in discussing more about this. While that notwithstanding, I have just a few questions because I had to look at your report on end-of-life management on photovoltaics in Ghana. So I'm just a little bit curious because it says that you have there's a market for reuse of solar PV than recycling. So I'm just wondering, and I see you have some costs. So how did you come up with that cost? Is it like there is already an established market that's recognized by the formal sector, or I just want to know a little bit about this. And also the average lifespan of the panels before reuse, because it says that there's kind of a preference for reuse. So I just want to know, like, in your experience, what's the average lifespan before reuse? And then a couple more. I did just have like the yes, and also the just a little bit for personal preference. Just want to know if the researches that you in your own opinion, because this recycling is not done in Africa, more especially in your case studies. Like, do you think the recycling rates, especially in say Europe, could be realistically, or the efficiency could be met in the same way in say Ghana or South Africa if we're adopting the same methodology and the same values? And the last question will be, in your own experience, which are these panels that are mostly used, because you say there's kind of a phase out of polycrystalline panels. So which is the dominant one in the market? And we have a lot of fake ones. And so I just want to know your perspective on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Reginald. I think I'm going to hand over to Matthias for that first question on collaboration, knowledge creation between Kenya and the DRC and how we can kind of build on that. And then afterwards, I'd call on Tobias to speak to the solar PV report. And then perhaps priming everyone for the last question to have a quick answer to, the recycling standards in the EU and whether their methods are kind of comparable or aspirational in the African context, and how we could use what works and lose what doesn't, and how we'd leapfrog perhaps to catch up and perhaps revolutionize in our own way. So that's for all the panelists. I think, Matthias, please tackle the collaboration knowledge sharing component question.
Yeah, thanks. I think it's a very good question because we do work, of course, in the countries which we have identified, and this is the main funding we have for implementation of projects. So we are not really working directly in other countries. But we have a kind of a knowledge sharing component or a little bit of budget within these programs where we can ensure that we actually connect to other countries and other initiatives. Part of that funding is also that we support the STEP initiatives. We're actually the new secretariat of the STEP initiatives, and as the STEP initiative, we are launching an African coordination or focus group. And I think that's the place where you also learn about other programs and projects which are active in some of these countries like Kenya or Tanzania, not the DRC, I think, but there are some others or the whole SADC region. And I think that's probably the place to go. Also for research collaboration, I think we do have interest in research collaboration. We also have possibility to support it in some extent. So definitely that's something. Adrian Specker is actually the responsible person running the STEP initiative. He's also in that call, I think. Maybe he can post the link to the STEP initiative and his contact details, so reach out to him. Thanks.
Thanks, Matthias. I think, Tobias, let's get into the solar PV question.
Yeah. Thank you very much for the questions on the PV report. So first of all, the question was, what is the market for reuse and refurbishment, etc. So we wouldn't say it's a ripe formal market. It goes from black to white with many steps of gray. You see that from the report. I now from the scratch cannot tell you when is the exact best moment for refurbishment of PV panels. That was also, I think, not part of the study. The idea was really to first get an idea of the market. We used to call it baseline study, and that's the information that you find in the report. Same on technologies. Now, as I stand here, I'm not so much familiar with the nitty-gritties and the technologies that are in the report. However, when it comes to the best moment for refurbishment, we learned from other devices that it should not be too late. So if you wait too long before you start a refurbishment process or repurposing refurbishment, the technology might be too old, and the economics that are behind, or the residual value is not high enough. I can tell it for a computer, for example, everything that is collected after 4.5 years, let's say after 5 years, there's hardly any chance for refurbishment because it's too fast. That is different for the PV panels, for sure. But from the scratch, I cannot tell you when that optimal point in time would be. The other question, I wanted to stress that this study was done by our team on the ground in Ghana. So first of all, Mountain Research Institute, for example, Bertie is also here in the call, and also the Ghana National Cleaner Production Center, together with EMPA Switzerland. So it's always this we work together. It's not something that we elaborate here in Europe at our desks alone. However, and that's the last question that you had. You were asking if collection, how it is organized here in Europe could be a blueprint for African countries. And here I would definitely say no. Why? Look into the German EPR system. Looking into the German EPR system, for example, shows us it is very complicated. Responsibilities are not straightforward. We would always say, if you set up an EPR scheme, responsibilities need to be very clear and very transparent. And you see that even with the scheme that we have, we only collect in Germany, for example, around 40 to 45% of e-waste in general. So we still have, after so many years, this huge gap. I think if you want to collect in an African country, you can make use, for example, of the so-called informal sector, incentivizing them by specific monetary incentives. I don't know, you give them 5 or 10 euro, or maybe 2 euros, depends on the country, per old device to make use of this very effective collection system that is already in place. So in a nutshell, no copying a system and trying to make it happen in another country does not work. You would need, we'd say we need a tailored system for the situation there. And that will definitely be part of CEI, because we've seen among all the countries, we need to make EPR functional, which is the biggest challenge, I'd say.
Thank you so much, Tobias. So we have 2 minutes left, and I see there is a hand up, and I think if we can get this question very, very quickly succinct and we run through the panel, then perhaps we can close on time just. So Matteo, would you mind giving us your question very short and sweet? Matteo, are you there? Am I pronouncing your name wrong? Okay. Too precious a time. We have a minute left. So asking for the rest of the panelists, I suspect similar answers, but we aren't looking to copy and paste systems. And I suspect that there is definitely room for improvement. And I really do believe that the innovation that happens on the African continent can teach the world a lot. So I'm going to ask Khada to give her insight on that, and Paul, but very quick because we're officially out of time.
Well, in a nutshell, definitely we've gone a long way and there's room for even more. We just need to focus on the implementation of regulations, conformity, financing mechanisms, and definitely integration of the informal into the industry to perform in a non-hazardous manner. So I think these with expansion of e-waste streams would prove to be very effective in the next initiative in the next following years. Hope I was quick.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Khada. And Paul.
I think I'm going to be even quicker. What the colleague said, I agree with completely. We're in a unique position where we are getting to learn through especially the WEEE program about what's happening in other places, but we actually implementing it in South Africa and other African countries in a way that makes sense for our systems. And so I think that's how it will continue.
Thank you so much, Paul. Okay, over to Katrina to close us off. Thank you so much. And I'm so honored to have been your moderator today.
Thank you so much, Aisha, and thanks to everyone that presented today. It was so enriching to hear from all the different country perspectives, and there's so much work to do, so I'm very much looking forward to the next phase of CEI. And the rest of you, please stay tuned and connect with us as ASIN to also stay informed about the project. And if you want to help us as the network, please fill in the feedback survey. That really does help us to drive these initiatives forward. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a lovely afternoon.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.